What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to JW Diaries. My name is Justin. So today I have another special interview for you guys. Some of you may recognize this person from the protest last year. She had a very, very memorable, very impactful, very powerful speech that she gave. And after that speech, I had a lot of people saying, who is this lady and where can we hear more from her? So she's done a few interviews on some other channels, but in this interview with her today, she's just going to go through her whole story from childhood to adulthood of some of the things that she went through in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And one of the big things that she went through was going through the experience of being trapped in a marriage. So I won't say too much more than that. I don't want to spoil the story, but this is definitely something that I've talked about a lot, about how witnesses rush into marriage. They believe they're doing the right thing. They get with someone who's a witness, who is well reported on, only to find out after they say their I do's that this person is not who they thought that they were. They are not who they projected that they were. And then they're stuck. And when these women go to ask for help in their marriage, they're often told, well, you made your choice. And that's very similar to what happened in Ivy's story. So I won't say too much more than that, but this is a very, very powerful interview, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So this is Ivy's story. Well, Ivy, thank you so much for coming onto the channel. Now, before we get to your story, I know you were at the protest last year. That's where most people are going to know you from, is from your very, very, very powerful speech at the protest. So why don't you just talk just real briefly about your experience last year and some of the things that we have coming up this year.
Listen, I couldn't believe that I was actively participating in the protest, or just a protest period. I've always wanted to be involved in activism. But of course, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you have to remain politically neutral, socially neutral, right? And you don't get to participate. So last year actually was pretty much like a dream come true for me, being able to have a voice and hear the voices of others, like in person. I met so many beautiful people, from California to Canada. Shout out to my girl Ash. Like, I met so many people, even MJ, you in person. Like, it was just amazing to be there with everyone and to feel welcomed. So I would definitely say it was a very welcoming and healing experience last year, and I expect nothing less of this year. So we're, honored to partner with Be Free and help with, advertising, messaging, and things like that. So be prepared, everyone, for an intake form or an Eventbrite so you can register. Let us know if you're coming, if you can't come, if you might come. We just need the numbers because we know today's data-driven world is all about numbers. So we need as many people who either know Jehovah's Witnesses, been affected by Jehovah's Witnesses, has treated a Jehovah's Witness, like whatever your affiliation was with this community. We want you to hear our stories and our voices collectively, and we also want your allyship. So that's what it's about. The mission for Be Free. She wants to spread the message. She wants more coverage, more awareness. And that's just what we're happy to be able to do this year. So come on out. September 13th. It's a Friday. She wants to shoot for that date. Too, because it's Suicide Prevention Month. So what more appropriate time to have a protest in regards to the inhumane practices of shunning and the violation of human rights for free. We can worship how we want. It's a right that we have, and that's being violated if you want to walk away or leave. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Yes, yeah. And last year was amazing. Yeah. And like you said,
it was cold, but it was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool, yeah. But yeah, very, very healing too. I've heard a lot of people talk about just how healing that was. Both people that were there and people that just watched it. It was just very healing to hear our message spread like that. So
yeah. I look forward to it again. Hopefully we'll do some type of meet and greet or welcome reception. I know last year there was just afterwards entertainment, music. Mm-hmm. So it was just nice to be around people. It's interesting how when we were in the organization, they would say you can only find that type of camaraderie or, brotherhood there. that the world is so divided and da 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 da, right? List goes on. And you come out here into the real world and you realize that people are just people, and that there was nothing different or nothing special about that close community that you were a part of, because it's easy to duplicate and replicate. You just have to, that's it.
Common mission. That's what it's about. Having a common goal. Good people with a common goal.
Exactly. And it's seasonal. We know relationships are seasonal too. So it's like, let's just accept these facts of life. Yes. So that we can better navigate and not be as devastated when we encounter a roadblock.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's get into your story. So as usual, I'll start out at the very beginning. So how did you get involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? Were you raised in it? Did you come into it later in life? How did you get involved?
I would say I got involved through my mother, because she got it by way of my natural father. My grandmother was a Jehovah's Witness, and I remember as a small child going to the Kingdom Halls. Didn't really know what I was doing or what it was going on, but for a period of time in my childhood, my mother and natural father became Rastafarian. So that was me too. And I remember that being the first time I would come into encounter with, I guess what some people might say, spirits, ghosts, ancestors, whatever you want to call it. But I was a small child, I'm like 5 years old. I don't really know what to do with all of this. And one of the things my mom taught me was that God's name, or the source of life, you call him her Jehovah. So that name always became sacred to me, because she told me that there was power behind that and there was safety in it. So whenever I would have these paranormal, supernatural experiences, whatever you want to call it, when I was starting to become frightened by the experience, I would always call on the name Jehovah for comfort and safety, and to kind of snap out of what some people might say is a realm or whatever, but that's pretty much my very first, I would say, attachment I started to create emotionally or psychologically with Jehovah. And then from there, it was a little bit easier through conditioning to transition over into the actual religion, like becoming an active participant. And that didn't happen probably until around third grade for me. Yeah, third grade. Because there was this little annoying boy that was in my class, used to get on my nerves. I think his name was Mark. And my teacher at the time was Miss Peters. So I definitely know it was third grade. So my mom started studying. And then from there, when she started studying, that's when we started going heavy on. We had our last Thanksgiving with the family. We did a last Christmas. She let me dress up for Halloween one last time. She was like, listen, this is your last round of this. We're not doing any of this anymore. And it was saddening because we didn't have a lot of family that was there locally with us. And I was already removed from my natural father's family. So there was like this host of cousins and aunts that I already was disconnected from. And so for her to make that decision, which was by all means her decision, her right. I'm not saying she was wrong for doing what she felt she had to do at that time, but it did have an impact on me as a child. So that was it. And I have to admit, there weren't a lot of doctrinal, or what I would say, just human interactions that I shared with my peers after becoming one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I can't say that there was really any true meaningful ones that made me believe that it was the truth. And so that concept or consciousness, took me into my teenage years.
Very interesting. I have never spoken to someone that has a Rastafarian background. So can you just go into that for a second of what? I mean, well, you were a little kid though.
I was little.
As much as you believe, or as much as you remember.
Yes. So one of the first things, well, there's a few first things that I remember. So I remember locking my hair up, but at the time they were considered dreadlocks, and you didn't shape them or form them or intentionally create them to look a certain way. My mom pretty much just washed my hair and never combed it again. And that's how I got dreadlocks. The other thing I noticed was we started wearing more cultural fabrics and garb. There was more dashikis. My mother started wrapping up her hair beautifully. I used to always just look at her and be like, you are the most beautiful woman on the planet, when she would like wrap her hair. Almost like what you would see like on gold necklaces of like Nefertiti, like how she has that crown. My mom would do that, but with the garments and fabrics. It was super dope. But incense, oils, vegetarian, or if I'm not mistaken, vegan. I don't really recall eating a lot of meat, a lot of natural ginger. Obviously learned who Haile Selassie is, Rastafari, Lion of Judah. The colors, of course. I don't distinctly remember what the colors mean, but there's a flag. I was taught it, but again, I'm like kindergarten. I don't fully remember. And what else? Oh, ganja. We can't leave out the ganja.
Very interesting, huh?
Yeah.
So that
It was
would
cool.
definitely be a cultural switch to go from that to the very very
Dark.
stale, very
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses. So but yes, like you said, you were in third grade when you made that transition. So how was it to now? That's kind of like to my story. I went from fifth grade being a normal kid to sixth grade Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
So what was that transition like for you to go from, being a regular kid, you can do all these holidays and stuff, to now you're in a religion that says that you have to be so much different from the other kids.
Yeah.
Do a bit bullying. How was that for you?
It was lonely and frustrating. I can say probably like fifth grade. And the other thing is we moved around. So that definitely didn't help. So I was born and raised to an extent in Youngstown, Ohio. Once we became one of Jehovah's Witnesses, we moved to Columbus, Ohio. Now, there's no one there. Like at this point in time, I had never been to Columbus, Ohio in my life, even though it's like 2 hours away. Um, there's no one there. I'm a child. There's no one there. So I start off in one school. We move, and I finish half a year at another school. By this time, I'm now in fifth grade, so I'm going to sixth grade, another school. So as you can see, just right there in that 3 year disruption, like all the kids I ever knew, my social life, my security, like I know who the bullies in the neighborhood were. I know who the little, perv boys was, and the girls who always wanted to fight. Like I had all that figured out. So moving, it was disruptive emotionally. And then I gained a father, which was cool. He was actually pretty nice. Really gave really good, solid advice. Actually, I think some of his advice is what I remember the most. But yeah, and then we start hanging out with people from the Kingdom Hall, which most of those kids have been born into that religion, into those communities, and they already had their friends. They already had their cousins, because we're talking generations of people now who have been born into this community, this belief system. So yeah, they didn't have a need for more friends, so I never really fit in. And the kids that I started leaning to or trying to fit in, it was the outcasts, right? The kids they were 15, not baptized yet. They gave mediocre talks, perhaps on the school, right? Their comments really weren't that in depth, very surface, and that's if they comment at all, right? So we all know that those, along some others, are checklists that we were trained, whether it was through the people but around us or directly we heard from the platform. We learned to start judging people as to whether or not they were doing really good or if they were really bad, really right or really wrong, So, but those was the kids that was cool, those were the kids that was accepting of me. So it's either hang out with these kids in the congregation who don't really believe in this stuff anyway, and you can already tell they got one foot out the door by the time they're 16, or hang out with the kids at school, right? Because now I went from middle school thank heaven, stayed in that same school. And then I went to high school. So I'm carrying these kids over with me. And so that was nice because now I felt like I had a community of people that I could hang with. But that was complicated because by that time, I'm no longer wanting to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Like I told my parents, like, take me off to school. I don't want to be an unbaptized publisher. I'm kicking it hard at school now. Like, there's no way for me to get out of this. I'm telling people I live in a Jehovah's Witness household. I go with my parents because they are Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, I started creating a lot of verbal distance between, you know, oh, you're a Jehovah's Witness. Because I'm like, no, I'm skipping class and I'm smoking reefer. I'm not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not giving witness to God and his characteristics right now. So why would I do that? Besides, no, give me some of that birthday cake. I love cake. I'm a little fat kid on the inside. Like, listen. So I knew all those things. And so when I went to discuss this with my parents, you know, it was shocking for them. It was really shocking, you know, and they were going through their difficulties, you know, probably like 5 years into the marriage. So that would have put me around my freshman year, you know. My father ends up getting disfellowship. My mom ends up getting disfellowship shortly thereafter. So, you know, I did spend a good year and a half, probably between 16 and a half to like 17, 18 in a non-witness household all over again. So my teenage years and being around the Jehovah's Witnesses, it was very interesting. It wasn't cut and dry or black and white. And I saw and witnessed a lot of things that should never have happened or gotten swept under the rug according to the doctrine. But there's a lot of self-suppression. And I know for a fact now that that's why a lot of the young people, as they call them, they don't stick around. And we're talking 90s. Now we're in 2024. So I can only imagine the amount of what that feels like to be that repressed. And that's challenging.
Can you go into some of that stuff? And before you do that, can you go into just how you went from this kid that was going along with it to then being where you're telling people I go with my parents, and you know, how did that come about? How did you make that bridge?
Oh, I was getting tired of being used. Like I had some really cool, you know, witness kids that I hung with, and it was usually one or two at a time. So there was one young girl that I would hang out with, and I probably was in my 8th grade year, maybe freshman year, in which everybody doesn't know I'm 5'11". I've been 5'11" since I was 10. So no one knows whether or not I'm an 8th grader or 9th grader or whatever. We just know Rita, and she's always been that way. So she lied on me like twice because she wanted to be with some guys. You know, she was hanging out. And I remember one time I was at my aunt's house and my mom calls and she's going bananas and I'm in trouble. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I didn't go. I wasn't there. Like, I'm literally having to defend myself now because my friend has now lied on me about her whereabouts. She's baptized. I'm not. And it all just came out to be this big, nasty thing. And I was just like, dag, like, one, how you going to do me like that? I'm your friend. 2, you big idiot. Why didn't you cue me in on the deception? Like, that was stupid. You're supposed to tell me so I can have your back at least. And, you know, 3 was just like, you don't do your friends like that. Like, that's not cool in general by common sense. And then I'm like, how does any of this mimic any of the behaviors that I'm learning from the Bible or an imitation of Jesus? So I'm like, and you're baptized. You don't feel any need to uphold a standard that you pledged your life to? Like, so that started making it a no for me. And that I just progressively made the transition from there. Stuff at home wasn't right. Like I said, eventually my father got disfellowshipped. So that happened around my sophomore year, right? So if anybody's keeping time, there's a lot of shit happening in a short period of time. And so you don't just get disfellowshipped overnight when you're married. So obviously I'm watching the relationship or the marriage of my parents deteriorate. And they were also bringing new life into the world. So my mother was expecting twins also right before all of this happened. So it was just a lot of factors. I couldn't play any sports. They were telling me I couldn't join marching band from 8th grade to 9th grade. I didn't have any artistic outlets. Like there's no ballet. I didn't do no dance classes. I didn't do any of those things that, you know, kids would want to do. There was no summer camps. There's no music lessons. Like there's nothing happening. There's going to the Kingdom Hall. There's field service. I'm thinking there's these lying, deceitful kids who need to be out of here. And my only option is to hang out with kids at school. Like this is no outlet for me. This is not fun. And, you know, not to brag, but like I love to learn. I'm a quick study and I'm creative. And you just can't have that type of personality and be a free spirit and you don't have anywhere to put it, you know? So having all that boxed in, you know, it's really literally a suffocating or like a choking feeling, right? So that's why it was easy for me to start to transition and be like, no, I don't want to do this, because, you know, when your back is being put up against the wall, you naturally want to fight back. And so I guess spiritually, I could feel my back being pressed up against the wall, even though because of the supernatural experiences I was still experiencing throughout like life, probably, you know, even now. I thought, okay, well, Jehovah is real, right? Because at least this one thing I know is working. So I still believed in like the Bible. I still believed, you know, in a higher source. I still believed in that Bible-based timeline and the evolution of history and stuff like that. But I just didn't want to do it no more. It wasn't fun. I didn't get treated well when my parents were disfellowshipped. I was of driving age, so, and I got my driver's license at 15 because I'm an overachiever. Yeah, so I'm at least 16, between 16 and 17. I took my sisters, all three of them, 2 were in a car seat at the time, to the Kingdom Hall 3 times a week. Book study, let's not forget about that. Theocratic Ministry School, then you had Sundays, and then also you can throw in service. So you have a 16, 17-year-old taking 3 minor children to the place of worship, not really getting any support. Like somebody might come and grab one of the little sisters or something like that, but predominantly that was on me. You have people wanting to get into my business. They want to know like what's going on with my parents, because now they're both disfellowshipped. And there was a lot of things that wasn't supposed to happen behind the scenes with them, but that's their business, their story to tell. And then you throw in everything else. Get out of school, come pick up the sister, come home, get the other kids from daycare. I'm at the house, I'm making sure dinner, you know, lined up, whatever my mom told me to do. Like I was the next in line. So I had to run the house whenever she wasn't there. To make sure everything was good. You know, we had chores, certain things had to be done by certain times. My mom's a little bit, she probably would have did really good in the military, but anyway. So it was a very structured environment for me with, again, no outlets. So it started to become very easy for me to make the mental shift like, yo, I don't want to do this. Or I'll achieve some things in life and then I'll come back to this. You know, let me get comfortable first and then I'll come back to this. So that's what it was. And I probably was going through some type of depression as well. Like I didn't know there was a such thing as cutting. So I wasn't a cutter, but I was someone who would inflict pain on myself when I needed to get something out and I couldn't get it out. You know, so I actually used to burn myself. So I know that I needed a lot of help to process the emotions and all of those things that was happening, right? The moves, the change in religion. Now I don't have my family. We're not even going to visit them on holidays when we have time off. Like it was a lot. Everything that I knew that I was familiar with, even my, you know, the location, the kids, the school, like you throw all of that on a child plus this crazy, fearful, paranormal, spiritual type of awareness and ability, and literally not having anyone to talk to about it. Like no one.
So your
your parents are disfellowshipped. You're taking your siblings to meetings on your own.
Yeah.
So, and now you're pretty much out of it. So how did life
Yeah.
go for you when you're out? And then how did you end up getting back into it?
Oh, like, I knew you was going to ask me that. So everybody knows who's familiar with Jehovah's Witness teaching, or if you are a Christian, right? Typically, you believe in the story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son doesn't realize what he has, how good he has it. Then he goes off into the world, meaning the unknown, and he lives this life that leads to debauchery, right? So basically, in modern day terms, he goes out and gets into financial debt, ends up being a male gigolo. Maybe he got into some gambling, has some gambling debts, ends up not being able to take care of himself. 9 times out of 10, he might have been drinking or had a drug problem. Like, he just came so low because he just veered so far off the course, right? Like, it's almost like he made every wrong decision one person could ever make. Well, guess what? He comes back. And there's this huge celebration, and there's like, oh, we're so glad you're home. And so the prodigal son returns, and everybody's happy. He's back. Yeah. So that was kind of like one of the persuasive thoughts that I had once I started to come back around. Because my time out, I really didn't have like these desires to go out and do what people would call crazy things. Like, I always found body piercings or body jewelry interesting and cool ways of self-expression. So at one point, I actually had my tongue pierced, and it was crazy. I think that was the first time I realized like how much influence I would have over people, whether for the good or for the bad, right? Because you already have that concept beat into your head as an oldest child about how you set the example, blah, blah, blah. So after I did it, like 6 of my friends and family like went and did it too. They're like, "Oh, you're courageous. If you could do it, I can do it too." So, I did that. I didn't get any tattoos, even though I wanted to. Would have totally been ahead of the curve too if I'd have got the tattoos I wanted to get, because they became like super popular 10 years later. Of course, college, which is frowned upon. And then I was angry. Like, I was angry for so many things because, again, I wanted to do so much when I was in high school to kind of set me up for success for college. Obviously, I would have loved to have gotten more scholarships and really participated in the National Honor Society, like all of these things that I got maybe accepted into, just there was nothing that ever happened with it. And so I was angry. So from there in college and having all these crazy experiences and not being able to fulfill my goals, my dreams, things, that I wanted to have in life, I ended up getting a job. I didn't finish college. I would kick it really hard though. I partied way too hard. I will say that, full disclosure. Got my own place. I moved way across town because I didn't want to be bothered with no one, especially from the Kingdom Hall. My mom, even at that time, we had a little bit of a strange relationship. I was like, if y'all want to just pop by and see me, you have to drive 45 minutes. So I moved like far across town to the other side of town. And I would periodically get these letters, like cards from my mom. Even though we weren't talking, she would send me cards, which is really cool. I had a boyfriend or so, going out, doing all the things. And this ties into the prodigal son, right? So you don't have financial literacy as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It wasn't like anyone taught me anything financial. And if your parents are coming from a background of being marginalized, being redlined, they don't really have the financial literacy to pass down to you either. So of course I go to college, they offer you credit cards right away. This is 2000. And so I get into debt. That's normal. That's no different from anybody else, right? It's the same. But as a Jehovah's Witness or being raised to be one, I thought that. So my life's not going well, right? Don't finish college. Now I'm in debt. I'm sitting up here kicking it really hard, partying, I'm fornicating, right? I'm not married. I'm checking off all the boxes. I'm the prodigal son. So still didn't obviously think I would come back as soon as I did. Because remember, I always thought like, okay, I believe in Jehovah, I believe in the Bible. So, you know what I'm saying? I'll come back around. But just not like around like 40s and 50s. That's what I had thought. But anyway, I'm like, I can't go back. I can't go back. I want to do what I want to do. And I'm out here now. And guess what? Life isn't going the way that I thought it would go. And I'm like, whatever. Then 9/11 happens. And instantly the fear reflex kicks in. I'm like, this is triggering the Great Tribulation. Like, this is the cataclysmic world event, the thing that is going to happen that has never happened before, like in our time period, right? I'm like, okay, this is it. Millions now living will never die. I'm like, I've got to get back to the Kingdom Hall. So I go back because I asked my parents if I could move back home, because at this time my mom's reinstated. She didn't stay out long. My stepfather is still, disfellowshipped, but at least they're back cohabitating. And they're like, you can come back. Obviously, anyone who's familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, even with your parents, it don't matter if you're drug-free, if you're practicing abstinence, and you got a job, you just need a little financial boost from your parents. If you're 9 times out of 10, and from my personal experience, if you're not going to the hall, if you're not even expressing like you have a desire to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you risk, there's a high probability that they could say no and not let you come back in, only based on those 2 factors. So I didn't know what they were going to say, because I wasn't an upstanding, human being per the description of the witnesses. And they were like, no, you can come back home, but here's the stipulation. So I had to go to the meetings. And I didn't want to do it because it was boring. They saying the same stuff I heard when I was 13. I'm like, no, like, what are we talking about now? And it was eventually through that, of course, going to the meetings, hearing the exposure. I heard one really awesome talk, and it made me think like, oh, I'm hurting Jehovah's heart. I'm disappointing him. How can I do this? You know better. So I go into the self-flagellation, and then finally someone asked me if I wanted to have a Bible study. And it was a missionary sister. She was new to my congregation, which that played a big part, because after growing up predominantly in that congregation and people knowing my story or wanting to be nebby nosies and all that kind of stuff, and the gossip that was going around about my family during the teenage years, I was like, I'm not sitting down taking nobody's advice. Like, I don't want to hear none of yours. I don't want to hear none of y'all. Like, y'all can kick rocks. So when she came in and she was new, she always was dressed according to, the standard for Jehovah's Witnesses. She was respectful, had a very submissive demeanor to her husband, excellent commenter, still pioneering. Like, she checked all the boxes for a woman who wanted to, meet or exemplify that standard of success, right? If you're a witness and you're a wife, there's like this certain character that you should have in order for people to look at you and be like, that's an example, right? She's in the center of the congregation. So I studied with her. She's a phenomenal teacher, and I called her like my second mom. And I still love her to this day, because she was really sincere about what she taught me. And I know she was sincere about what she believed, because she lived it. And she had a broader experience than I had, to be able to serve as a missionary overseas. So I always take in the perspective of the person and the path that their lives has come from, to kind of, rationalize my feelings or my responses towards things that they're still hurtful, So that's pretty much how I came back, was the trigger of 9/11. I was living life before that, doing what every other natural human does. It wasn't like I was doing anything crazy. I'm not like abducting cats out of the neighborhood and performing live autopsies on them. You know what I'm saying? I'm just going to the club. I'm working. I'm drinking. You know what I'm saying? I might smoke a joint from time to time. I I'm a tomboy, so I'm one of the boys, you know. So that was just it. That's all I was doing, bro. Like, I wasn't doing anything extreme.
Yeah. Basically, it's just the average life of a
Yes,
20-something-year-old.
I wasn't
That
smuggling
when you're a
guns.
witness, they make it into you're being the worst person in the world.
Oh my goodness! Like, I'm not even like committing federal criminal offenses. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
so yeah, it was some. It was funny when I say it out loud and I look back. I'm like, oh my gosh, like. Ugh, you had so many other options. Like, why did you feel like that was your only one?
Well, I mean, again, you came in third grade, so they had those roots in you from childhood. It gets
Yeah.
into your head, and yeah.
Oh
But
my goodness. Oh, train up
so
a boy or a girl. That's another
yeah,
good one. Yeah,
oh
that
yeah,
played through my head too.
oh yeah, oh yeah. So where do things go from there? Then now you're studying, so you
Ooh.
getting baptized and really getting into it, or were you one of those people that kind of stayed on the surface? And how did it go?
Listen here, I was on a fast track to missionary service. Do you hear me? So I studied. I did really well as a student. I told my conductor that she needed to give me homework. She needed to give me research. I said, listen, you're dealing with someone who has a relative measure of intelligence. I said, so I literally can get up and skim this page before you come and give you all the answers. So I don't even have to study and I'm going to give you the answers. I said, my ability to connect and apply things, if you don't push me, then the study's going to be over really quick. Because she told me, like, listen, don't waste my time. So I feel like the way our study started is why it was so successful. Because I was fully myself. She would come over sometimes and I'll be asleep on the couch. And she will wake me up pretty much, but the Cat Williams, like, I'll wait. I'll be like, yo, she's gangster. But she was really sweet how she did it. So that lit the foundation for me coming into that organization, which is almost like if you were starting off in any particular career and you can think about the person that has motivated or inspired you to go down that path, and then that person personally, you know, walks you through the processes and teaches you, you know, what you need to know to be successful at what you're, you know, striving to do. So I probably became an unbaptized publisher, I'm going to say within 6 to 9 months. Had to be sooner than that because I think within a year of me studying, I got baptized. Yeah, I studied for a year and got baptized. Right after baptism, like without delay, I filled out that auxiliary pioneer slip because that's the first act of service that you can do after you get baptized, you know, further acts of servitude. So I did that, and I was going to go into the missionary service right after I got baptized. But I feel like at that same convention or like the next, they made the announcement that they weren't accepting single people into that missionary school, that you had to be married. I was like, mother bitch. I was so devastated because I'm like, I had no intention on getting married either. So I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was like, I'll just pioneer and then maybe I'll serve underneath this grade. I had a ton of pioneer friends that I was around. There was one pioneer couple, married couple, no kids. They worked full time and they were pioneers and they did it together. I used to crash their house all the time. They were super dope. I really appreciate, you know, all the times they let me come over there and vent and cry and run away. And they knew me really intimately and really well. Like they knew a large part of not just my story, but each of my sisters in terms of the evolutionary process. And I wanted to be a good example for them too, right? I'm the oldest. I'm the one that's baptized. I'm baptized first. You know, I've lived this life of debauchery and I've come back. And there was a lot of pressure there too. Not bad pressure as if I can't take it, but it was expectations. Like everybody was looking at me to be like this super, super witness, you know, only as super as a woman could be, right? So I couldn't do really anything else without being married. Like all of the forms of service was for married individuals, which is why it was so like, hooray! when they announced a few years ago about the school for single women or whatever it is. And it's like, wow, you know what I'm saying? I'd have had to wait all those years, 15, almost 20 years to be able to do something that my heart was desiring without being connected to a man, you know? So transitioned in, had all that expectation on me, and then I bombed. I bombed by getting married. Yeah, I bombed. I married a person that nobody wanted me to marry. I was overly optimistic in the power of prayer and scripture, because I thought that with all things, you know, with Jehovah, all things is possible. So I'm like, you know what? We're two baptized witnesses. We have a love for each other. We profess a love for Jehovah. We know that this isn't going to be easy, but if we work together and do all the things that the organization is telling us to do, we should be fine. We should be fine, you know, because I'm like, I have a lot of trust and confidence in Jehovah, like what is perceived to have him work things out for me, you know. I'm like, I'm still going to rock with this dude. So I went ahead and got married. Can't say that there weren't any red flags, but again, for me and my experience, talking about the past with my parents, getting into having detailed conversations about the nuances of having a relationship, interacting with a spouse, you know, conversations, boundaries, you know, more detailed conversation is what would be beneficial for a person like me, right? A person who listens and learns very quickly and who has the ability to empathize and really dig deep to the emotions that's being conveyed. I didn't get any of those type of conversations. And I grew up in abusive environments where I watched my mother be thoroughly abused, you know, physical abuse, assaults, neck collars, like a lot of things happening. So even my perspective of what domestic violence was very jaded. I'm thinking domestic violence is only broken ribs, black eyes, busted lips, you know, gashes, you know, things that you have to go to the hospital for to get, you know, medical attention, stitches, you know, braces, things like that. So I'm like, oh, it's nothing that bad, so we should be fine, right? Yeah, we're witnesses. We took like this unintentional vow of poverty. So, you know, we're going to keep our lives and our eyes simple. So, hey, it's not like we need a lot of money. Long as we keep looking forward, keeping our eyes on the prize, keeping our lives simple, you know, what is it? Corinthians 13 about love. We keep doing that. We do all these principles. We're going to be fine. That's because I firmly believed in all of those Bible principles. Not just like, oh, I believe them, but literally it became my way of life. Like it became my natural thought process, dealing with everything that I encounter. Even if I didn't want to wash the dishes, I would go to the sink and tell myself, do all things for God's glory. So everything I did became about being pleasing to Jehovah. So in this marriage, even though it was horrible for me, and I didn't receive the affirmations I needed, the type of quality time I needed, you know, the intimacy that you should share with, you know, your mate, your person. I don't care if you're married to him or not. If this is a person that you made a loyal soul vow to, then you should be able to communicate about what you need and don't need in a relationship, right? So I didn't have any of those things. There was tons and tons of financial instability. I believe that I had 18 addresses in maybe like 14 years. Yeah. And 7 of those times we lived with friends or family. So it always boggled my mind as to how anytime I was in a congregation and I would express help or need, and I would tie it back to the scripture of, you know, supporting one's own household and taking care of one's own household. And if you don't, it's like a person without faith. And I looked up in the back of the the God's Love book when it used to have the appendix, probably back in like 2010, 2011. Who knows? They probably changed it by now. But it pretty much was stating that that is grounds for disfellowshipping. That if you're not providing for your family, that is a scriptural obligation. And as a head, if you're not meeting that, that's a problem. So I didn't really understand how having that many addresses and hopping around that much, no one could put the dots together to say like, yeah, there's a lot of instability here. Like, what's going on? So it was just like a compounding of things, right? And I took a lot of blame for it because after becoming a witness or after getting baptized, I'm the one who chose to get married. So I lived with a lot of that in silence for a really long time. Like the only people I would talk to about the challenges in my marriage or the perceived lack of application of the scriptures, insubordinates, obstinance, fits of anger, abusive speech. You know, I tried to use all of the nomenclature, right? The terms that elders would be familiar with to get help. And then that became a problem because technically, if you are a married person, a woman, you really can't go to the elders for help without the knowledge and permission of your husband. So interestingly enough, there would be a few sit downs we had, but it started to feel like no one wanted to deal with us because we were constantly problematic. Like there was never a time in my life, my marriage, which is the majority of the time that I was a witness. So was in the organization for 20 years and I was married for 17 of those 20 years. For 16 of those 20 years, I was physically married under the same roof with my mate. So all of that happened in that span of time. We also had a child in that span of time, who also was impacted by that because she was a part of those moves every 9 to 12 months. You know, she was switching schools at times. Like it was a very disruptive experience with what I would say no support. And the reason why I'm saying no support is because those that was closest to me, and they meant well. I like to believe that they meant really well. And even though they would acknowledge my ability to perceive and understand, I don't recall anyone ever appealing to my humanity. I don't recall anyone trying to appeal to me as a woman. I remember receiving a lot of do nots, don'ts, and why would yous, and look at so-and-so, look at that person, versus saying, I understand what it's like to be in love. I understand to feel like somebody has swept you off of your feet. You know, what is it that you really want to do though? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Like outside of the feelings, let's talk about this. And I would always have to pursue advice. I'm like, why do I have to keep pursuing advice? Like, I thought I did all the things. Like, yeah, I dated this person. I asked their elder body, like, how are they? What are they doing? Are they, you know? But it was like more and more of the past started coming out after we were married. Like an avalanche of balderdash was happening after we got married, you know? So again, I'm blaming myself, like, oh, you should have dated longer. Oh, you know, this and that. But after like 5-6 years of that, I'm like, yo, how much more do I have to endure? How much more do I have to go through for it to be considered the sufficient amount of time has passed, right? I thought about that scripture too. Like literally, I used to live and breathe and eat and dream this stuff, you know? So I don't think anybody knows that part of my psyche to imagine what it was like to actually be me. Like you will never know, but can you just imagine? Can you correlate any of my experiences, the emotional components, with anything that you've gone through, right? Which to me isn't a tall ask from another human, right? So it was rocky, Justin. I would have to say, like, just when I thought I was going to be like in a friend circle or be able to be like, oh, we have those regular couples that we hang out with, it was always a problem. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. There was a period of time where I became overly righteous. But that's because I was fighting so hard for righteousness, or my perceived concept of righteousness per the organization, that if I didn't, I feared that I would become the thing that I hate, which is a hypocrite, which is someone who was living a double life, which is someone who is not taking the name of Jehovah seriously because they're bringing reproach on it, because they're saying one thing and doing something else. So yes, that became my focus because it became a way for me to cope with the challenges that I was dealing with physically, right? The moving, the no jobs. And by this time I'm a mom. So now I'm going super hard as to like, no, because I'm like, I'm all my daughter has. I have to show her the positive examples because everyone around me had did something, in my book, treacherous to me. They had done something treacherous to me, whether it was through gossip, whether it was through, we just going to let you go through this because this is your fault. And I can understand that too. But, there's nothing that happens in a vacuum. Every single decision that we make, whether it's to support a friend or not to support a friend, whether it's to share a secret or not to share a secret, like good or bad, better or worse, everything has it's a ripple effect. Some of those ripples are going to be light and pleasant and refreshing, and some of the ripples are going to be disruptive. So I had a lot of disruptive things that happened to me in my tenure as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I would say my fondest memories would be out in service, out in the community, out in the neighborhood, because I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy hearing their stories. I enjoy seeing how I can see myself as them. Because in order for me to teach you something or to try to encourage you or lift you up, I need to first know where you come from. Because I need to be able to understand why you feel the way you feel about where you're at now, right? So then that way I know how to structure the advice that I'm going to give, the empathy I'm going to allow, to display, or whether I'm just not going to say anything at all and be there with the person in silence. And then say, hey, if you ever want to talk again, if you want to brighten your day, here's this. And I hand them a track or something, or be like, can I leave you with some food for thought? And I would leave them with a scripture. So I enjoy doing that, but I still enjoy doing it now, so that's why I got into corporate, training, software training, while I'm doing this activism. Like there's so many ways that I've learned now that I can use some of those powers, perceptive powers, and just like natural talents, things that the organization didn't teach me. I had to, through use, acquire some of the skills that I have and become proficient at how to navigate and be mentally, flexible, and deal with situations, all while still trying to keep my own desires in check, and fight against that anger that has been there probably up until like recently. I still have some sprinkles of anger in there, but I'm working through them. So it wasn't a lot of fun. It wasn't. It was a lot of giving for me, but that's because I'm a giver. Like I still give a lot now, but I have less expectation of it coming back now. Whereas, in the organization, you're supposed to give. And there's a lot of takers there. And I never really got back what I put out. So I didn't know it until I was disfellowshipped, just how empty I was, how unfulfilled I was. I became so focused on just doing the things and ignoring my own self, ignoring the primary feelings, not the secondary feeling. Because the secondary feeling is sadness and sorrow and anger and all that. But the primary feelings were disappointment, frustration. I was disillusioned, betrayed. So all those feelings, I never sat with them. I always just sat with, oh, this isn't right. But, and I just keep pushing through and I'm, and it's like, it's okay. All right. Now you think of Joseph, think of Job, pray, think of Jonah, think of Hezekiah. Like, your mind just goes somewhere else to take it off of you. And then, you just keep giving because that's supposed to be the way that you receive. So that's that transition. That is what my life was before getting baptized, and then what it turned into after, and some of the components as to why. Um, but it wasn't really fun for me. Service was fun. I would say my life became more exciting, and it became more of a joy when I had my daughter. If I hadn't had her, I would have definitely flew the coop. Like, I would have either walked away from the religion and my marriage all at the same time and said, F it, I'm not coming back. Or I would have had to essentially do the only two things you can do if you're married as a Jehovah's Witness, which is cheat on your mate, aka commit adultery, or kill them. That's it. Because if they don't die, and if you don't have hard evidence or proof that they're cheating on you, the two witness rule, then you are just stuck married. You're in marital purgatory. That's it.
Yeah. Marriage becomes a prison. Yeah, what you're talking about is, and I'm glad that you're talking about it, because as a man, I can't speak to it. But this is something that really, I mean, it impacts men too in
It
religion,
does.
but it mostly impacts women. And
Yeah.
like you said, you did what you were told to do. You went to his elders. You said, "How's this guy?" You want to look for someone who's well reported on. But the thing is that we don't think about, when you're at the Kingdom Hall, you're putting on that mask.
Yep.
You're never fooling yourself at the Kingdom Hall. You never fool yourself out in service. You never fool yourself when you go to most of these gatherings and stuff. When you're around witnesses, you have a whole different side to yourself.
That's
You have
right.
knobs that you turn down, and and they don't ever get to see who you really are. And then people end up getting stuck with someone, and after they say their I do's, months after that, you see who you're really with.
Yeah, and I've heard of a
And you're
lot
stuck.
of people who they got married, and the person they married was not the person at all. Like, I've heard of people getting trapped, and it's primarily the males trapping the females. So, for example, I personally feel that the Jehovah's Witness organization is perfect for men who are chauvinists, right? Um, because they know once they woo a woman, a sister, if she says yes to marriage, she is bound to him for the rest of her life. Like, that's just it. So he literally can treat her however he wants to treat her, and she's supposed to be submissive to him. Um, and that was my situation. Like, the head of Christ is God, is Jehovah. The head of man is Christ, and the head of a woman is a man. Like, that's it. And the scripture win him over in silence. So you're essentially saying, woman, shut up and sit down, submit and be humble, right? So, and oh, if he made a wrong decision, it's my responsibility to back him up and to make it look as pretty as it can look. It's my job to save face for my mate. This is the reality if you marry, or if you're married to someone that does not truly believe. They're not a true believer, right? Because there's a difference. And thinking about it now, like over the last 4 years that I've been out, and then even in my marriage, I'm like, there was like, what else was I supposed to do? Like, for those people who intimately knew me and they intimately knew what I was going through, or they knew he was full of shit, no one helped. It wasn't like anybody rallied around me like, listen, here's an escape plan, which is what you would do, is one of the recommendations if you know somebody in a domestically violent situation. As a friend, you offer support and encouragement, but you also help them figure out a strategy, a way out. That's a part of getting out of an abusive relationship. You have to prepare. That's one of the steps. And you have to be active, and then you have to take the action. That's like the last 3 of the 5 steps. No one ever helped me get past the first 2 steps. I had to come to those conclusions all on my own. And it wasn't through reading witness literature. It was from like visiting the domesticviolence.org and going to the domestic violence hotlines and reading, looking at the cycle of abuse, the wheel of abuse, and then looking at this long list of the types of domestic abuse, which again, from my upbringing, domestic violence is only you getting punched in the face or something, you know? No one had ever taught me about the words, the gaslighting, the mental manipulation, the isolating you from friends and family, the financial entrapment, the sexual pressure and demand. Like, no one taught me about these things. No one talked, and maybe to their defense, they didn't know, right? You don't do all this extensive research when you're Jehovah's Witness outside of the lines that they've painted for you. So it was really, it was rough, bruh. It was rough.
I can tell. And I like what you said, because it brought up a really good point, that part of helping a friend through a domestic violence situation, if you are a true friend, you know, you hear them out, you help them, but you also help them to find a way out. Jehovah's Witnesses want to call themselves your friend. If they are even willing to listen to you, they give you that. But what they're not going to do is help you find a way out. If anything, they're going to encourage you to stay in. So, but
that's what I got. I got all the encouragement to stay in. We don't want to interfere with the headship arrangement.
Yep. Yeah. And that type of personality, that type of reasoning can lead women to lose their lives. It does go that far.
Yes. So suicide was an option for me that I almost took because I'm like, I just cannot. Like this, I literally at one point was like, this cannot be the rest of my life. Like this cannot. And this is me in my late 20s, early 30s. That's prime time. Yeah. And here I am freaking out mentally. All of my circuitry is fried on the inside because I'm like, I cannot be 50, 40 going through this. Like this, that was hell. That was torture to me.
Jeez.
I was like, bro, I can't have another 17 addresses.
No. So how did you end up, I know you mentioned you got this fellowship. How did you end up getting out of the witnesses? And then talk a bit about what you're doing now. I know you have, you mentioned back when you were a child and into your teen years, you had this creative expression that wanted to get out, and now you actually own a company helping people to do that. So, but yeah, let's start with how you ended up waking up and getting out of the witnesses.
All right. So when I separated from my husband at the time, it was 2018. After that, I noticed it became even harder to get support in my local congregation. Now, this is me with a child too who was in middle school, so around 10 and 11 actually. And it's just me, which is fine. That was fine. But the emotional support would have been nicer. So I did have eventually like one or two sisters who, we kind of came up with a little bit of a camaraderie because we had children of the same age, same gender. So that worked. But as far as the elders went in my congregation, they were ridiculous, bro. Like they didn't help at all. I had one elder who was very clever about his ability to give me advice or counsel. And he invited me and my daughter out on service one day, and then me and him took like a door together, and he gave me a full-on reality of the situation, pretty much like your husband is not going to change. He is extremely difficult to work with. Understand totally 100% where you're coming from. You should not be having to deal with this. And I feel really sorry for you. Please keep, keeping the faith, keeping your integrity to Jehovah. And he was like, if there is anything that we could do, he was going to try to do it. Somehow, some way that got shut down. I started getting ignored. They started redirecting me to my field service overseer more and more. And I couldn't even get help to move my daughter's bed into our new apartment. Like that became a problem because my husband at the time, I guess he would complain or he would like call different ones and be like, I don't know what he would say. all I know is what would come back to me is it was more of the attitude like, yeah, we got to still talk to your husband about this. And I'm like, we're separated, bro. Like, you know why we're separated too. Like, why is it that you have to get his authorization? Like, you know, I'm done. Like, I'm done. So that was very frustrating. And then, of course, that rolled into 2019. Boom, you run into 2020. It's the pandemic. And at this point, me and my husband are still separated. So it's like 2 years we're separated. He doesn't want to reconcile. He actually told me if I separated from him, there was no coming back. So I'm like, wow, this is actually what you're saying. So you're telling me that I don't have the right to leave you. I don't have scriptural grounds for a separation, which, by the way, that terminology should have never existed because there's never been scriptural grounds for separation. You could just leave the person if you want to or not. So I didn't expect that he would fully go through with that, which is one of the reasons why in like 2019, I kind of like started dating him again, trying to have him over so he could spend time with our daughter, like different things, letting him stay at our new place. And because I was the type of person like, listen, I will leave. You can come over and play video games with our kid or hang out. Like, you can do whatever it is that you need to do to maintain your connection or your relationship with your child. Me and you, though, never more, never more. Like, we're not going back there. So I felt like I did all the things that I could. I felt like I did all the creative solutioning that I could to try to reinvigorate my relationship with my husband at the time. Even so much as still giving some financial support. It was really difficult. And so not to get the feedback or, like I said, that support, that the friendship, that's what was missing. My elders were not my friends. They were not my friends. They didn't treat me like I was a friend. They didn't persuade their wives. If it's this whole arrangement, like, it was never any like come to Jesus moment with anybody, you know? People would always talk around it, but no one really talked at it. And the one sister that did, I mean, she essentially got pretty much blackballed, you know, from having a relationship with us, with me and my daughter. And all of that in the elders not being my friend. Now, mind you, too, I did write a 4-page letter to the branch detailing very much all of my experiences up until that point with my marriage. And I even copied and pasted certain Watchtower articles, awakes, that was specifically talking on that topic and what the procedures would be. Like, I very eloquently would put the history and information, scriptural references together. Like I want it to be very clear to you as to where I'm coming from with this information. And so I wrote the branch finally under the advisement of like my best friend at the time and one of the elders who were actually in her congregation out of state. They're like, you have to write the branch, you have to write the branch, you have to write the branch. And I'm thinking like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to write the branch. I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to put all my business out there. And I'm like, they're going to call a meeting or something. They're going to tell the local elders, like, you need to, I don't know, investigate this, talk to the elders in the congregation they previous came from. Like, because I provided references too. Like, if you need to talk to certain people, this is our history of congregations. And here's the history of people who I've complained to before has told my story. That seemed obvious. If you need to verify if I'm lying or not, then you need to talk to a multitude of people from different places, you know. Of course, they didn't do any of that. They had a brief meeting with me. The letter I got back from the branch was saying that, okay, you know, the usual response is propaganda, and that they had shared my letter with my local body or whatever, and that they will be meeting with me. So they did meet with me because I wanted to see certain things which were not helpful, like the letter that came over with us, our publisher records and things like that. Because I'm like, I thought there was a trail of behavior or history that came with you from one congregation to the next. I'm like, it's almost like notes in a call center is what I would think. At least you can have some type of idea of what you might be working with in the congregation and maybe orchestrate a plan to actually help that person in some way or another, right? There's none of that, which we can talk about that another time about how just underqualified they are and how the organization as a whole provides zero financial, social services to its members, and how they are really leaving people disadvantaged and disenfranchised. So anyway, that is how that experience went when I separated, in the 2 years of me separating. Not able to get back with my mates, not able to really get any help or advice from my local body of elders who was supposed to be my friends. So again, it made me feel like an outcast. I didn't really enjoy having to explain myself over again to a panel of men, obviously, because I have trauma. I've been in an abusive relationship. I only have like two perspectives of men at this point in my life. Either you're going to pay me or I'm going to screw you over. Like, those are the only two options. And it would have been nice to be able to openly and honestly express the anger and the regret, and then get advisement from there. But of course, that's where the friendship comes into play that I didn't have. Not being able to get help with the move, that was a trigger. And then I gave my service overseer, I printed out 2 pages of information from the domestic violence website. One was the cycle of abuse, and the other ones was specific areas of abuse, and I highlighted the ones that I had been experiencing. When later he came for my shepherding call with our circuit overseer, I asked him if he had the opportunity to look at that. I'm thinking in preparation for the shepherding call would have been a great idea, but at least since I'm in your field service group, you would want to know a little bit more about how I am. Maybe that explains why I'm missing from service, because I'm battling depression because of what I'm going through, right? But who am I, right? I'm not a psychologist or a licensed social worker. I don't, these ideas just randomly come to me, as I think that they would be, very easy solutions to implement. But he said, oh, so that's what that was on the corner of my desk. I threw that away. And I'm sitting here at my dining room table and I'm thinking, I know this mofo did not just say he threw my wheel of abuse away. Like, you forgot that I personally handed you this, looked you in your face and said, this is something I want to give you because it helps to further explain what I've been going through. But again, I had to restrain myself. You can't let out that type of emotion. You can't have a fit of anger. So that's how that went. So again, no acknowledgement of self, what I have been going through, and no plan of action to help support me. As a matter of fact, I requested the shepherding call with the circuit overseer maybe like 6 weeks before his arrival. And when I got the shepherding call, it was because I damn near attacked. I had to pursue the circuit overseer and ask him directly, did brother so-and-so schedule my shepherding call with you while you were here this week? And he was like thrown off. He had like a list, like, they have like this paper, it lets them know what. And he was like, let me go out to my car really quick. And he went out to his car. And then when he came back in, all I saw was him in the back, like the lobby of the Kingdom Hall. He had like 2 or 3 brothers. And he was like, I guess saying like, yo, you missed somebody. She's not on the list, right? And I'm like, yeah, I requested this 6 weeks ago. It's almost like there were certain people in the congregation who got to see circuit overseers and be around them and serve food to them. It was never like in this particular congregation. They were different. Each congregation was different. Let me see.
No, that was the case of mine too. There's a special
Really?
group of people that get to hang around the circuit overseer when he's around. And then unless you're like a new study, then you get thrown into that group too. But other than that, no, you're off to the side.
So. Yeah. So, and that's how I felt even with the shepherding call request. So he told me that about the will of abuse. I only got the shepherding call because I was the widow at the gates who wouldn't quit nagging. And there was really no advice they could give me. I included my daughter in that particular shepherding call because I wanted her to experience what it was like. That would have been her first shepherding call, right? She's like 10 or 11, and as a family, we had never received a shepherding call. So I wanted to expose my daughter to that experience because, the elders are supposed to be a shield, a shelter, right? For when you're having hard and difficult times. And so this is me again. I'm still having negative experiences, things that aren't that great. And I'm saying to myself, this is imperfection. They're not perfect. Never put your trust in men, blah, 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 blah. And then my daughter is there and she's having that experience as well. And that leads to me just saying, forget it. I have zero friendship support from this body of elders, from the organization in general, because I wrote the branch. And then I don't even have an out with my husband. Like, he's not working with me to rectify our relationship or to even get it started again anew, right? Which makes perfect sense. He didn't want to do couples therapy. He didn't want to do therapy on his own. There was no date nights or like, hey, let's go for a walk every Sunday night. There was no habits or patterns. He did not believe in that. He didn't believe in doing family worship. He felt like it wasn't a spiritual marker or measure for, your spirituality. It's not Bible based. There's nothing that is enforcing us to have these family worships. So everything was a fight. And I was very into the doctrine. I was very into the lifestyle. And I was with someone who was not, with someone who never was, even though I thought that would be the case. I thought that my mate at the time, my boyfriend, knew me well enough to know the type of spiritual being I wanted to be. So none of that happened. So that leaves me in marital purgatory still, not able to do or go anything, not to be able to be comforted. It's like I've been married for all this time and now I don't even have somebody to sit, eat nachos, and watch a game with. Like all those nostalgic moments that were pretty okay. There was some moments like that, but come on now, like, let's be real. How monumental is it for you to be with your mate and the only good things you can call upon are watching games, sports games, and eating nachos? Like, that just lets you know, kind of how pathetic the relationship was. That's a great moment. I'm not going to hold you, but you can't have a relationship built off of 17 years of those caliber of experiences. So I decided to get out of the marriage. And since I don't want to go to prison, I don't see myself suited for prison life. I did not want to be on the run or have my daughter have a murderer for a mother. So I took what I felt was the lesser of two evils and I got my smash on. That was it.
Wow. And like you said, a lot of women are put into that place where they're forced to cheat just to get out of the marriage. Because you were stuck. He didn't want to get back with you, and he didn't want to
reconcile.
Yeah. So you're stuck.
That's literally it. That's it. And you can't do anything more in the congregation. Because I wouldn't be irreprehensible. So, there's certain form, like international conventions, serving in any type of situation. Like, I couldn't pioneer. Like, there's nothing. You're just literally sitting there. You're just a number. And that's terrible when you become just a number and you're actually a human being. Like you're just treating me like a social security number or a bank or a membership number. Like, I get I can't participate in this. So I asked for help too after the disfellowshipping because I wanted to make sure that my daughter still has support, because I remember growing up with my parents' disfellowship, other Jehovah's Witnesses like to treat you like you have leprosy, like you have an airborne contagion, and they won't even come to your house. Like, I have people who wouldn't come to our house at all because I had one parent disfellowshipped. They wouldn't come into the house. Like, maybe they would come, but they would sit with us on the porch. They wouldn't let their kids come over our house anymore to hang out. Like, we always had to leave our home to go to people's house for gatherings or sleepovers. So I knew what that could be like because I was a child who experienced that. So I wanted to make sure that my daughter didn't experience those things. So there's no reason for her to. So I wanted to let them know that I was cooperative. You know, if her existing friends, clearly I have relationships with their parents. Clearly they have some purview of what my life is like. So I would think that they at least wouldn't cut my daughter off. Like, they would at least not let her have relationships with their children. But some of that is what actually happened. And she lost that connection that she didn't have to lose. And the elders were not willing to provide any resources to her or assign any sisters to be like, hey, we know this is going on. We want her mom to get reactivated. She's obviously a bright, young, very capable witness. Like, my daughter gave comments, you know, that sound like my comments, right? Because again, that's what I trained her to do. We would come into congregations and none of their kids would be commenting. And then my daughter raises her hand and she's reading scripture and applying it to one sentence in the Watchtower. So they didn't want to help support that. They didn't want to support her potential or ambition. And then they didn't want to support the fact that I have been loyal and dedicated. Like, when I got baptized, I had 2 active Bible studies and one was a regular meeting attender. She might have had just become an unbaptized publisher because she was giving talks. I'm like, so I'm trying super hard. It wasn't that I'm perpetrating, like I'm faking, like I'm doing every form of service of servitude that I can perform so I can maintain that in the circle, in the middle of the congregation. And to get kicked out, I mean, by that time, I didn't even care. I didn't even care. I was so tired of trying, so tired of being disappointed. And I just didn't care anymore. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to live my life. I wanted to see what my potential was in, you know, what I could create and what I could make. And it's been such a beautiful thing because now I have that encouragement in my life. I have that freedom of thought and expression. You know, I got back into modeling, which is something I always wanted to do. I got back into, you know, personal and physical fitness because obviously spending too much time on your body, personal appearance or whatever is looked at as vanity, right? You can't do that. Don't show more attention to yourself than you need to. We started a business, which is really nice. I mean, you can have a business as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but you're limited to who you can do business with or business for, obviously. If someone falls in the LGBTQ community, Jehovah's Witnesses did not, you know, so we have partners and people that we provide, you know, opportunities to and for that are in that community. Because guess what? I don't care. What you're doing is what you're doing. That is none of my business unless you make it my business. And that's because you done brought it to me and you need obviously some assistance with handling your business. So that doesn't matter. You know, if it's someone who is political or they're involved in politics, we don't care about that. You know, my partner knows one of the mayors down here, you know, where we live, got his number, you know, you can go hang out, like they can talk politics. I volunteer for different organizations, things that I wanted to do, again, involved in the activism with the protests, you know, being able to let people tell their stories, their truth. There's very few absolute truths in our world, very few when you compare them to the amount of times people actually use the word the truth, regardless of what they're talking about, you know, when it comes to religion. And it just feels good. It feels free. You know, I'm writing a book or a series of books. You know, they're poetic because I love words. I love to write, you know, so I'm a poet, a storyteller, you know, but I've never had the opportunity to develop these habits or these skills until now. Right. So I can look into them. I can YouTube things. I can do self-paced courses for everything that I ever wanted to do. You know, like I used to play the trumpet. So now I'm putting it on my schedule to take some trumpet lessons. I actually enjoy playing the trumpet. You know, I've always wanted to dance. So I have it on my schedule to be able to eventually do the type of dance that I wanted to do, you know, which is very free flowing contemporary. So I do fitness that is going to lead to those results. I can do whatever I want with my hair. I got tattoos now. You know, I'm wearing a nose ring. These are very basic things that I've always wanted to do that don't hurt anybody. And so now, having the business, we're going to launch a nonprofit that is going to help benefit people like us, regardless if they're coming out of Jehovah's Witness faith or maybe they're coming out of any high control situation or environment. There is a lot of disadvantage to having coming out of that situation. You need support services, you need mental health services, you need financial services, legal services, just your basic social services, food, clothing, hygiene supplies, like those basic needs. And we want to be able to provide that to this very niche audience and group of people, because a lot of them, like you said, they're born into this. So they literally know nothing else. Body language, they miss those cues, different tones of voice, they miss. Their minds are always focused on the future, and now they feel condemned for their past. So they need a lot of mindfulness coaching and help, to get those things sorted out. It takes years for some people, and they need that consistent, continual help. They need those intermittent services along the way, not just one time. They need those services broken up over time, because it's an onion. It's extremely layered. It's like one of those really good muffins. I think they're like those Pillsbury muffins that peel in layers. If only unpacking this religion and what the mind control that it has over its members, if it was only that sweet, if it was only that satisfying, but it's not. I heard someone say recently, there's nothing that we've gained from walking away or leaving or, speaking out. It's not like we did it and was like, oh yeah, I'm walking away because I want to give up my relationship with my mom, or I want to lose my daughter, or no, so it's a very brave move for people to go out, be disfellowship, stay out, and be like, you know what, you're not going to force me to come back because you're holding my friends and family and everybody I've ever known hostage. Right? Because that's what's happening. They're being held hostage, and they looking at you like you're the outsider, the one that's abnormal. And you're like, wow, you just have no clue, because I had no clue, So all the things that I'm doing now is to show that you can be disfellowshipped and still be successful. And what success looks like for each of us is different. Maybe success for you is just to be able to do more self-care because you neglected it as a witness. You literally don't know how to put yourself first. Okay, that's a goal of mine too. And I feel really good that now I can accomplish it without guilt, without self-flagellation, So it could be going out for that promotion. It could be applying yourself to your career in a way that you never would have before because you weren't allowed. It may mean attending that next funeral of your loved one that's in a church or a temple, because you couldn't do that before and they didn't care. It could be your mom that died. For a long time, it was frowned upon for Jehovah's Witnesses to go into a church, even for a funeral. So maybe now you're not a Jehovah's Witness, or you have mentally exited. You have the freedom to go to a funeral. You have the freedom to go to a gravesite. Maybe that's something that called to your soul. It always has. And you just want to experience it. Just then go experience it. I have. I didn't think it was going to be as liberating or as impactful as it was. It was a beautiful experience. Why? Because I missed my grandmother's funeral due to COVID, and I wasn't able to be there with her when she was dying. So I went to her grave. I stood there. I felt the feels. I took in the fact that she is no more. But I also embraced the concept that maybe she is. And if she was, I wanted to have that moment with her. And if nothing else, then guess what? It could have been a meditative session where I just went through the good times, and this normal, natural human experience, it hurts. Whatever you want to call it, to me, what I have found in my search for spirituality, or as I've come to grips with my own senses, that's how I translate or interpret things that are, unfortunately, they divide us. They divide us, and it's just words. It's just sounds that are coming out of our mouth. One of my thought-provoking questions is, if God, as you believe it as a Christian, is the one who confused the languages at the Tower of Babel, wouldn't he also be responsible for the conflicts and confusion over words? Miscommunication. the inability to really understand what someone is saying. I mean, because after all, we were taught it was one language, and there was one good side versus the other. So why divide the languages and create more division, create more separation amongst people? Why? So I go off here and I say Jehovah because that's God. But guess what? You don't understand that I'm saying Jehovah because you don't speak my language anymore. However, the sounds that you are making to say the same thing because it's in your mind as the same concept, your language is Allah. We're saying the same thing. We just have found a way over time to evolve, right? We found a way to culturally connect with our heritage, our history. You know, that's my perspective of religion. And therefore, it made me ask a question like, well, who altered the languages? Like, who made it possible for people to make their own interpretations and to try to make sense of their form of their worship, which could have been all the same until the language is split. So yeah, I think about stuff like that. I think about the possibility that maybe, you know, there's two sides to the story, right? I don't take for granted or feel like the Bible has been preserved all the way down till now. It's impossible, because if the elders are locally making these mistakes about people that's in front of their faces 2-3 times a day, then you can't tell me that the Bible has touched so many hands over so many years and there's been no pride, no nepotism, no ego, no nothing that got involved. Because after all, man is imperfect. So, you know, they say, oh, well, Jehovah had the power. He preserved his word down to this day. It's new light. We're going to put Jehovah's name back in the Bible in places that it was taken out. Really? Because I thought the Bible said that if you add or take away anything, that wasn't a good idea. So if Jehovah's Spirit is doing all these wonderful things, it's uniting people all over the world. They're speaking the true language of the nomenclature that is Jehovah's Witnesses. It seems a little backwards that God would have taken away the true language in the first place. It also makes me question whether or not his spirit actually can preserve his word throughout time, simply because people get disfellowshipped who shouldn't. People could take their own lives that shouldn't, because supposedly the blood is in the elders' hands who made the decision to kick them out in the first place. Oh, and the fact that they had to say 2 prayers during my judicial meeting because the brother was getting out of hand with me. Not that I was creating a scene or I wasn't cooperating. It's because of how he personally felt about what I was saying. What was I supposed to do with that? I already know that disposition is not one that I'm going to change unless I go to 100. Why do I need to go to 100 when I have spent damn near $400 to buy a last minute round trip ticket from Ohio to Florida just to sit here with you to confess? Does that sound like somebody who didn't care about their actions? I'm in Ohio with my mother and my family at the time, and I still make an effort to do what I thought was Jehovah telling me to do and did condition me to do. So now being free, I do whatever I want to do because I'm a good person. I don't have any ill will or bad feelings for anybody. And that's what gives me the peace of mind to be able to wear a bow tie. You know, I wear men's clothes all the time and I have no shame in it. I don't feel bad for it. It's art. It's a form of expression, you know, just like how you choose to wear your hair, whether you choose to dye it or not, you know, what you choose, all of it. It's just forms of self-expression. What makes you feel comfortable, you know, in your own skin, in your own shell, right? And having to always appeal to that, being mindful of other people's conscience, oh my gosh. You know how stressful that is, Justin, having to worry about how you cut your hair.
You don't want to stumble somebody.
You don't want to be a stumbling block. Heavens forbid that you're a stumbling block, you know? And I'm like, most of us can't really do anything about our basic anatomy. Like, I can't do anything about the fact that I'm 5'11", so my limbs are long. I can't do anything about that. So not understanding the struggle of finding skirts that are long enough is something, one, a man would not be able to understand. And 2, if you're not in my height category, there's some things that you're not naturally going to consider when it comes to the length, even if it's pants, like having to buy longs and talls and trying to be appropriate all the time. And women's clothes change all the time. Like our fashions and trends change seasonally, right? Not just because we just short sleeve tank tops, but the styles change. Certain neck styles are popular. They don't know any of this stuff. Trends of the world, don't follow them. Well, guess what? You still have to be mindful of the trends if you're trying to get me to make selections in a world that you say is so immoral and so what is the word when it's sexual? It's always sex. Then I need to be mindful of that so I know what to wear. I the V cuts and the you don't understand what's being sold in stores. Especially for those of us who were not wealthy in the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, which I can only imagine what some of their experiences were like and stories that they could tell about having true wealth and being in the organization. Because I'm like, if these kids was lying to go make out in the back of the car and they was saying they was going bowling, I can only imagine what that would look like if, you living in a 3,000 square foot home with a pool in the back and a hot tub. Just saying. So it's nice. Comedy is great. I don't have to scream my comedy anymore, so I enjoy going to live comedy. My partner got me into that. So when you say all the things you're accomplishing is okay, we have the business. Yes, we're going to launch the nonprofit, doing the modeling, writing the book. Those are all kind of secular accomplishments or just dreams that I've had that I wanted to do that I couldn't. But everything else that I mentioned, the clothes, the hair, those are also successes and things that I'm able to do now that I have chosen not to come back and trust and believe the choice not to come back. It wasn't made easy. It literally was not made easy. I didn't make it I'm not coming back because I just want to do all these things. I want a belly button piercing and a tattoo around my neck. No, it was really hard to just kind of sit in that decision. And I would say for the first 18 months, the ping pong of whether or not you're right. Am I apostate? Am I committing blasphemy? Do you really want to give up on everlasting life? What can you believe in? What you have no faith now? You have no hope? You have no future? Whew. Psychologically, it was hard. I'm not even going to lie. So for people who have woken up and stayed out, kudos to you. For those who are waking up and you going through that back and forth and you think you're crazy. You literally feel like you're losing your mind. It shatters your reality. Almost when you
let's do a follow-up video on just that subject, actually. Okay. It's got to be with you. Yeah. I think I don't want to rush through that topic. Let's do a separate one just on that.
We can get into that.
Going through that ping ponging, because I went through that too, and a lot of people go through that. And some people, as they do it, they end up on the other side. They end up going back. So it's something that we should talk about.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It was an interesting ride over my 20-year tenure as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I can say that it did teach me a lot. I can say that there were certain things that it did preserve me from, but that's how life is. There's always those decisions that you're going to make that can lead you to the left or to the right. There's always those moments that life will try to realign you so that you can be within your true self and your true purpose. And to be honest, some people need structured, organized religion in their lives. They need it. Some people need to be led. They need to be guided. And that's just not in school, leaders and followers, that's in life. That's in the animal kingdom. Everything has a hierarchy. I don't know why we sometimes as humans forget that we are a species. We're a species. We're no different than any other living organism. Our form is different, yes, and some of our capabilities are different, but we're still just a species of being inhabiting this planet. So free spirits or captive spirits, whatever you want to term it, but there are leaders. There are people who naturally will go to the top and the front of the pack. And it's not out of selfishness or greed. I'm not talking about those motives to brag on one's chest or whatever, but just truly wanting to make life better for yourself and those around you, and having the critical thinking skills to say, yeah, I'm not down with that, or I don't agree with that. And then being steadfast in what you know is true based off of comparative information, analysis, observation, like all of the things that science teaches you to do when you're trying to make a decision, right? Math teaches you to work it out, make it make sense. It has to balance, so those are all concepts that we have to consider in religion, not just life in general, not just in your finances, but in what you choose to believe and dedicate your mind and your heart to. It's important still. It's very important. I'm not going to blindly believe my financial analyst. I'm going to need him or her to show me some numbers. I'm going to need to see the results. I'm going to need the progression of the results to kind of stay on track, because the minute you tell me it's ticking up and then I'm going to have a problem with what you're saying. You need to give me a turnaround really fast. I don't mean in the future. Oh, when you're 89, 92, how about like in the next 7 days? So we don't, I realized I didn't do any of that when it came to spirituality, when it came to religion, boxing spirituality in, this certain.
It's all blind belief. You blindly follow. Yeah.
Yeah. So point. It's been fun though, waking up all in all, despite it being hard and dark and a yo-yo and scary, sad.
Yeah.
I'm
lonely.
Happy. Lonely, but I'm happy. I had a used to be best friend of mine, try to understand my thinking as best as she could. And she, asked me like to come back, or did I want to come back, or something about being back. And I said, well, what am I coming back to? And she didn't have an answer for me. And after the call, a few days, I thought maybe that question should have been more concise, or the explanation could have been deeper. Like, I miss you and I would like you to come back. Right? That has a different effect than, why don't you come back? And then I say, what am I coming back to? And you just leave it hanging. That's your opportunity to say, can you do it for me? Right? Appeal to my heart, appeal to my humanity. So then we can have a conversation. Because I even asked her, I said, is there possibly a way that we can work out communicating? Because it's not like anybody's going to know. Whether you send me letters in the mail or cards, that's just thinking of you and it's blank inside. Like, you can find a way to express love. And that's what I told her. I said, love is not just something you feel. Love is an action. It's an adjective, like a verb. Like, it needs to be things behind it. And I said, now that I know that, I have a different perspective on what I was told that love is. So now I can accurately say what it is that I need to fulfill this relationship. This is what I need for this relationship to feel like a partnership, and not just me submitting to something because you say so, or because you agree that it should be so. So that was a very hard conversation that we can talk more about, that relationship, because that relationship was my only relationship that was from the pre-baptism all the way up until maybe a few weeks ago.
Oh man. Yeah, we got to go into that one. Yeah. But last question for this interview, though.
Okay.
And you kind of already went into it, but I was asking anyways, just so I'd like to end on this note. What advice would you have for people, anybody that's going through a waking up process, anybody who's newly out, even people who are still in and just still battling with it? What advice would you have for people that are starting to open their eyes?
All right. So I'm going to say this from the perspective of, if you're not me. And the reason why I say that is because we all have different thresholds, different boiling points. Even though we all may be like still in the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, recently exited by choice, disfellowshipped, marked an apostate, or maybe you disassociated yourself. It doesn't matter where you stand in that. That's a spectrum. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, there is a spectrum of us. Some of the main reasons for our stories, the triggers for our stories are the same, but the nuances are extremely different. So I say that by saying I can't practically give advice to all the scenarios that are there. Like, I don't want to give anyone false ambition or false, whatever. But what I can say, based off of just the progression of what I've gone through, that I feel are just quintessential things, that would be to make sure you start educating yourself, meaning read self-help books, start to become familiar with the psychology, right? The actual functioning of the brain, its different parts, how, things come into play in terms of your body, right? We always hear about stress and how it affects us. Really, really start looking into your things. So that I feel like with more knowledge, there's power, right? They say that. So you will be empowering yourself to make decisions, to become absolute with your thinking, right? Because all of the change is going to happen when your mindset changes. Your circumstances may not change. Your money situation may not change. Your mindset is what has to change first, because that's going to enable you to make the appropriate decisions for you that you are comfortable with, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody has to live with themselves, and they have to live with the decisions that they make and the repercussions that come along with them. Some of them are unintended. You're going to still experience repercussions or consequences, even if you plan it out, right? Because you're dealing with so many external factors that are Jehovah's Witnesses, right? From long-term relationships to your parents, to your children, potentially your boss or your landlord. So I've known people who've got kicked out of their residences and fired from their jobs because they chose not to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So there's a lot of components that factor into that. You could be a single parent, or maybe you have children and you're the parent that's waking up, or the mother and father that's waking up. You still have to consider the indoctrination of your children thus far that you participated in, so becoming self-aware, mindfulness practices, and having a therapist, like a really good, solid therapist, and even a psychiatrist if you need that. Please do not be afraid to take care of your mind, to take care of your, emotional being, right? Your nervous system. Like, we're just a bundle of magnificent things that if we try to realign them as best as we can, it'll be for our better health, just all in general. So definitely put your mind and your consciousness first. Then anything that needs to happen externally, you'll be more equipped to handle it. And if you can acquire allies, even if they're not Jehovah's Witnesses. There are a lot of people out there who are not Jehovah's Witnesses who knew that this was a cult a long time ago. Like, we didn't know it or see it, but they've been knowing it for decades, Even some people I come into contact with now in their 30s and stuff, and they'll hear, they say, oh, that sounds culty. Like, you can just share one scenario, all of about 3 lines, and y'all just, wait, you had to get permission to wear a beard? Yeah, that sounds culty. Oh, what you mean you couldn't wear pants? So women couldn't wear pants? Oh, that sounds culty. So what, did y'all have a uniform? Like, people really are thinking like, so like Mormons, right? Like, they start throwing out all these other known closed communities, high control groups. And we keep saying high control groups, high control groups, because that's what sounds better. Almost like we were taught as witnesses when they say, oh, don't say homosexual or don't say this. They would be upset about that because the expression alternative lifestyle was out at that time. And so I don't know if you remember this, but they were encouraging us not to water it down and not to like try to act like, oh, it's not that bad. Alternative lifestyle sounds better. They was like, no, homosexuality, so the same thing now that we're doing, high control religious group, cult. But that's very harsh. I know in the beginning, I could not wrap my mind around the fact that I was in a cult. No, The reality was there, but I just could not formulate the words and let them come out. I just could not. I could not. So for anybody still using high control religious group, no shade on you. I understand it, but sometimes it's easier just to rip that Band-Aid off and just call it what it is. Like, you know what you know. And so that's why I said self-help and taking care of your mind, because once you know what you know, can't nobody take that from you. And the same thing goes for if you feel like you have no relationship with God or no higher source or higher power or the universe, whatever you want to call it. I take the scripture and say, well, no one can separate us from God's love, right? So that means that regardless of my membership status, the only person that can take away my connection to that higher source, to God, Jehovah, whoever you want to call it, Jesus, is me. That's the only person that can drop that relationship. So if I choose to let go of that relationship with that higher source, that's me. And I have the right to do that because that creation, that source made me with the capability to say yes or no to stuff. Why give me the capability if I can't exercise that? So just knowing that and having a broader perspective of spirituality, that also helps. And no, I'm not, I'm not atheist. I'm not atheist, but I don't feel like I have to subscribe to saying who or what I follow, because that's also a definition of a cult. So I choose to move the way I move based off of the different spiritual components that I have found commonalities in all forms of spirituality. I don't have to focus on the negative. I don't have to focus on the differences. I choose to focus on the similarities. I choose to focus on the human experience and how I can understand how a person feels as to how they got to where they're currently at, right? So all of these things are because I do mindfulness practices. So I read a lot of books, which, if you want to drop some of those in the description, I can provide those, but they've just been helpful. And then I write. So I would like to share a piece I wrote. That's okay.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay, so let me see, because sometimes you can't make out your handwriting, but I feel like it's okay. This was a piece I actually wrote early on when I was waking up. So it goes like this. It's like looking at a cloudy sky, trying to find smoke, or standing in the middle of a forest, trying to isolate the sound of peace. It would be nice if the obvious was crystal clear. At least that way I would know exactly what to fear. One would think the most difficult part of the process is peeling back the layers of damage, when in reality it's finding myself, discovering who I am for the first time, and being okay with what I find. Where I once ended is not the beginning. I am at the end of a road that I thought would lead everywhere, only for me to stand here and stare at a dead end. So alive by not knowing how to decipher a new beginning from an old end, finding myself grasping for what should be, drowning by what is not, mesmerized by the possibilities of what could be. It's as if I am seeing myself through the eyes of one who was born blind. How difficult this process is to define. So.
Wow, how it ended, seeing yourself through the eye. Wow, that's really the whole thing, but especially that line, that really puts into words how it feels to wake up and go through that self-discovery process. And it's not only discovering yourself, it's discovering this whole world and discovering your own views of the world. Everything you've lived your life off of somebody else's story, and now you got to write your own story.
Their perspective of reality, their perspective of forever, their perspective of the concept of existing.
Yes. So, yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Like that and be in my book. So, man, thanks for having me. I can't look forward to more videos, because then we can really cut up,
Oh yeah.
I love to cut up.
Coming on. Thank you so much for coming on. And I definitely look forward to our future interviews. I know there's going to be much more. So
and you already know, when we see each other in DC for the protests, we're going to have a good time.
Oh yeah. Just like last year. Yep.
No.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man.
So hopefully you guys really, really enjoyed that interview. I want to definitely thank Ivy for coming on, being vulnerable, and sharing your story. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people out there. And I'm really, really sure that it's going to give a voice to some of the women that are in these high control groups and cults that are going through a story similar to yours, where they are trapped in an abusive, in a toxic marriage, and they feel like they're stuck. They feel like they can't get out. And in that experience, marriage becomes a prison rather than something that's pleasurable. So thank you for giving a voice to those people, and hopefully it will help more of them to be able to wake up and realize that this is just not right. And of course, I'm definitely looking forward to our follow-up interviews. I know you have much more to say, so I'm sure other people are looking forward to hearing that as well. But with that, I want to thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for watching. Definitely stay tuned. I got more coming up, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.